The Associated Press, which reports to half the world's population, is back in the game because a federal judge, a Trump appointee no less, Trevor McFadden, in the District of Columbia, has issued a 30-page preliminary injunction finding on the evidence that the Trump administration and all of its major officials, from the press secretary to others in the administration, have been discriminating against the Associated Press on purpose, intentionally, because they don't like their viewpoint. It is a First Amendment violation of the highest order, and that is not how the First Amendment works in our country, says Trevor McFadden. I'm going to cover it right here, the only way I know how, speaking truth to each other on the Midas Touch Network. I'm Michael Popak. Let's dive in. Let me give you the update. Preliminary injunction is now in place. It means that the Associated Press, which had been banned and barred from all major reporting places within the White House, including what's called limited access locations, including the Oval Office, including having access to Donald Trump on Air Force One, in a way that none of the other wire services or actual reporters who have now been brought in by the Trump administration, friendly reporters, none of them have been penalized the way the Associated Press has. And all, as Judge McFadden said, all because the Associated Press refuses in its style book, which is the guide that its reporters use and therefore has influence over writing around the world. It refuses to recognize that there's been a name change for the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Now, there's other papers that have decided not to acknowledge that in any great way either, but AP is important. Donald Trump hates AP, doesn't like its reporting. This is part of the viewpoint discrimination that the judge found. It's the very reason he needs to impose this preliminary injunction. One note, I'll cover it at the end, but let me tell you up front, this order, which would immediately give the Associated Press its press credential back, its hard pass back, its ability to be in the pool, to be in the briefing room, to be in places when, Donald Trump and the vice president go after Zelensky in the Oval Office. They need to be there because they're hemorrhaging cash, as the judge has credited. This order is stayed until the 13th of April, giving the Trump administration time to go run off to the D.C. Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court to try to reverse it. I don't think they're going to be able to. I think Trevor McFadden has written a very well analyzed, solid jurisprudential opinion, and I'll go over it now. Let me start from where we are with the First Amendment, since we're all here a part of free media, independent media, and it's all important to us. Let's talk about the role of the First Amendment, which he spends a considerable amount of time talking about, starting with our founding. I think it's important to remind each of us the importance of free press in our constitutional republic. The judge writes on page 4 that a pseudonymic writer at the time of our founding, who went by the name of Philadelphiensis, wrote that the free press was the scourge of tyrants, oppressors, villains, and bloodsuckers, the bulwark of freedom that causes the haughtiest lording to tremble, an inestimable jewel that places the poorest citizen on a level with the richest demagogue. Well, I can think of quite a few people that fit the bill for tyrant, oppressor, villain, and bloodsucker. I'm not sure if that's exactly what McFadden was trying to intimate, but, I hear you. He also goes on to say on page 16 that the immediate and forceful backlashes to attacks on the press, which are legion now under the Trump administration, underscore how Americans understood the First Amendment in the early centuries. They saw this foremost protection as safeguarding their natural right to heap honest criticism upon the government without fear of official reprisal. That's what we do on the Midas Touch Network and Legal AF. We heap honest criticism, and we don't have fear of reprisal. But I think it's important to note that McFadden felt he had to write that in his opinion. Now, let me write to you the most forceful passage, or read to you the most forceful passage on page 21 of his filing. Here's what he said there. He says that while the Associated Press does not have a constitutional right to enter the Oval Office, it does have a right not to be excluded because of its viewpoint. In other words, no reporter has the right to enter the Oval Office, but if Trump is granting limited access or access to the Oval Office, he can't say, whoa, not you, AP, I don't like your viewpoint. And the evidence was legion, testimony of reporters, and even the words of Donald Trump's own people, and Donald Trump himself used against him, no surprise, to prove that the judge said proved that AP was being discriminated against intentionally because of their viewpoint. Remember, viewpoint means they won't call it the Gulf of America. Here's what the judge had to say about that. And while the AP does not have a constitutional right to enter the Oval Office, it does have a right not to be excluded based on because of its viewpoint. And the Associated Press says that is exactly what is happening. On page 21, the court says this court or the court agrees. Indeed, the government has been brazen about this. Listen to these next words. This is a federal judge appointed by Donald Trump who says they're just acting out and they don't even care who knows it. The government has been brazen. Several high-ranking officials, Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, others in that office like Taylor Budowich and Trump have all repeatedly said that they are restricting the AP's access precisely because of the organization's viewpoint. Government counsel, that's the Department of Justice, admitted that the Associated Press was not being chosen for access despite its eligibility because of its viewpoint. Think about that. At the hearing, the Department of Justice admitted they're banning the Associated Press